So typically, I've got this little cute thing I do with this verse, and I'm probably going to do it later. But as I was studying this, something jumped out to me that made me look at this in a little bit of a different light. And so I want to include all of this verse. And so we're going to do Philippians 4:11 through 13. So we're going to unpack Philippians chapter 4, verses 11, 12, and 13. If you've got your scripture, feel free to read it at home. If you have your phone, don't hesitate to live tweet. And if you have neither of those, that's totally cool. I'm just gonna read the word after this coffee here. All right, Philippians 4:11, 12, and 13. I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or living in want. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Now, typically, I love to unpack the concept of I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. But as I was really starting to unpack this and prepare contextually for today, the whole concept of contentment is what I really feel sets this verse up for so much application. Because, and here it comes. Oh snap, we're doing it. We're putting the vest on. So snazzy. Love this vest. So 4:13 is I can do all things through. Not with, but through. Much like with this amazing vest that you see. I can stay warm through it because it's on. But if I just take it off and I'm with this vest isn't doing much good at all. It's only going actually through the vest that I have the warmth and the intended purpose of the vest. And I feel like so many of us fully struggle with the concept of willpower. I just don't have the willpower, that food, that Reese's egg, that Cadbury cup, that insert indulgence here. I just don't have the willpower. The great news is that really none of us do. I think willpower to some degree is a myth. Now, this is a hill I will die on. I think priorities can trump willpower or the illusion of willpower at any time. But what actually gives credence to our priorities? I think that's where this verse really comes into play. Because when we look at our struggles when it comes to things such as willpower, one has to logically ask the question, if God's a part of this process, where is God in that decision-making process when we feel the weakest? At the times right up to when we're going to have that indulgence, where is God in that process? I've yet to see a lot of opportunities where people have said, I was praying this whole time to not have that craving, and God just failed me. What I have seen a lot of times is, I didn't really actually include God into that conversation. Actually, I didn't really have God as a part of that decision-making process as to what I should do with my time or what I should do with my screen habits or what I should do with my nutrition or my feelings. And so for me, I think the biggest myth when it comes to willpower is that we have so much and that those who are successful have this abundance of willpower, and then those who struggle don't, I would make the case that very few people have willpower, but the people who succeed have the best priorities. And if your priorities are to honor God with your decision making process, then one has to make the argument, well, where is He? And that's for me where we really start to unpack 413. Because if we look at our weight loss process through the lens of the rest of the world, one has to ask, well, what makes yours honoring God and what versus the one that makes this about having a great booty? The context would be, well, if I get a great booty, that is awesome, but that's not my goal. My goal is to be a good steward of my time. My goal is to honor God with the calling and the resources He's given me. And if I get abs in the process, hallelujah. If I look good in yoga pants in the process, amen. But that's not the be all end all. But this is where I think a lot of us struggle because we try to do it on our own with God, but not through God. And I think that's the biggest struggle. And I think that's where most, if not all, diets fail, whether it comes to actually completing it, gaining the weight back, getting stalled, is that we leave God out of the process. And what started as this nice, harmonious endeavor, and we had this honeymoon phase because everyone gives us credit because now we're trying and good, look at us, we're going to get our stuff together. And then we get to the part where, I call it living in the ocean, where you left the island that you were on. You can't go back because you've already lost weight. You've already started to try. But then your goals are so ahead of you that you're like, I still have 20, 30, 40, 55. I have X amount of pounds to lose, but I can't see that horizon. And so we try to willpower it up as if that is going to solve our problem. But for many of us, that has never solved our problem. And so the context and the challenge that I want to sort of endeavor us all here is to really look at your process. Look at how you plan your meals. Look at how you look at exercise. Look at how you budget your time. Look at how you spend your time. Are there God prints in all of it? Or are there not? Because if there's not God prints in it, and you're not executing the way you feel you should and or could, then one can really clear make the argument that it's not a lack of willpower or it's not even a lack of effort. It's a lack of not using God to the greatest extent that He can be used, to be brought into the process. But then that unpacks a little bit further, and that's why I want to include verses 11 and 12, really focusing on the concept of contentment. Because I would wager that a lot of us, when we have discretionary food choices and we have discretionary lack of motivation choices, it's because there's a lack of contentment in our life. And that lack of contentment comes from anxiety, fear, lack of trust, anything that is keeping us from executing these things quite often comes from some emotion that we use food or apathy to medicate with. So we should also address that issue because twofold, where is God in that process? And I know there's never been a greater time to be anxious than now because we've got some new normals going on. But we trusted God during Christmas time and everything seemed fine. And I think, and I would take this even a step further as it pertains to weight loss, in that I feel like we've all prayed about big things, whether it's, God, should I take this job? God, should I proceed with this relationship? God, should I buy this house? Should I not buy this house? It seems like we put the vest of God on, or the armor of God, not the vest of God. It feels like we put the vest of God on when it comes to big decisions, and we need that extra providence that we know that only God can provide. So what is keeping us from doing that with our weight loss and our nutrition? So to really, really, really unpack this, we're going to just we'll look at it through my lens and my journey for a little bit. So when I first lost the weight, and some of you are familiar with my story, most of you are, lost 120 pounds. It was awesome. Gained it all back and more. That was not awesome. Then lost 200 pounds. That was awesome. It's been on for 15 years. Even more awesome. But the biggest difference between the 120 and the 200, the 120, if I'm being very honest and pain, like I'm sweating because of how honest I'm being. So this is me feeling guilt and shame. The first 120 was all about vanity and spite. It really just stemmed from sixth grade, first middle school dance, where I was the fat kid and no one wanted to dance with me. And I never forgot that. And so when I lost weight the first time, it was the whole like, I'm going to be sexy and I'm going to show you and look how hot I'm going to be. And it was great, but it wasn't A, what I really wanted, but B, it wasn't sustainable because it was an improper motive and it couldn't sustain. So when I gained the weight back, it made sense because it wasn't done for the right reasons. And then when I lost the second time, it was because I deliberately said, wow, I love God and I'm talking about it. People are actually paying attention now. And they're judging my actions because of what I'm claiming. They want to see if my words and my deeds are actually agreeing. I don't know if I can do this. So let me bring God in because I know that God can do this with me and sometimes for me when I'm not strong enough. And that whole 200-pound loss process was really an act of worship. And it became an act of worship, not for any other reason than but saying, God, how can I honor you today with the resources you gave me? How can I be content with the amount of time you've given me? How can I be content with the amount of finances you've given me? How can I be content with the amount of food that you've given me? And really stemming from the concept of digging into the spirit for the contentment I needed to then set forth the actions. It's like we talk about quite often. When you're struggling to lose weight, you've got external conflicts, internal conflicts, and philosophical conflicts. In this mindset of willpower, we jump straight to external solutions. Like, I can do this. I'm awesome. I just got to put down the Reese egg and punch that Cadbury bunny in the face. Like, but that only lasts for so long. And then tomorrow comes and it's a new struggle. And you can only punch bunnies for so long until someone starts complaining. Side note, don't punch bunnies. Point being is that we jump straight to the external means without understanding that, well, internally, what are we content and discontent with? And more importantly, is that discontentment a divine discontent? Like, is it the discontent that makes you feel called to donate food to a food bank? Is it that discontentment that makes you feel called to pray for someone? Or is that discontentment where you almost dishonor God and look in the mirror and go, oh, so ugly. Even if I lose weight, what if I have sagging skin? Ah, but we go there because we've not addressed the philosophical of, am I doing these initiatives with God? Or am I taking all my efforts and funneling it through God? Because if you go from there and you lose weight through the lens of God, then the internal challenges become a lot easier because God's already answered those questions. What if I lose weight and no one cares? Well, you've got your health. That's amazing. That's A, that should be good enough. But B, everyone who cared for you before still cares for you. And collateral, they're going to be able to love you a lot longer because of the health you've given yourself for years and the quality of life you've given yourself. That internal challenge is already solved when you start with the philosophical answer of who God is in this process. But if we don't ever bring God in and put the weight loss through the lens of scripture, then we're sit to look in the mirror and go, oh God, these stretch marks are terrible. Oh, I'm so uneven. Why? And then that's your basis for emotion. And then you have to apply external solutions to that. No wonder we don't have enough willpower because there's nothing to fight for. But when you start philosophically, by bringing it through the lens of the gospel, quite honestly, a lot of our internal fears and struggles and blockades, they start to get dismantled because A, we've got eternity, and that's awesome. But between the trees, there's a whole lot of wisdom on how to live life. And we've unpacked some of this in prior lessons. Everything's permissible, but not everything's beneficial. Should I have this cheesecake? Well, what's God calling you to right now? If you're using this cheesecake because you can't emotionally cope with something, then no, you probably shouldn't have this cheesecake. If you took this time to go start running a marathon and you just ran 10 miles and you're depleted of glucose, this is the perfect time to have cheesecake. But why are you having that cheesecake? And then we talked about the prodigal wasteland mentality of you've got to do something. If not for Jesus, then for the American Heart Association's recommendations. But you can't do it all. And so you've got to give yourself that grace. But none of this makes sense if we leave out the filter and the lens of who God is to us and who God is in this process. So to kind of bring this to a little bit of a conclusion before we pivot and start asking some questions, the biggest reason that diets, weight loss initiatives, whatever buzzword you want to use, the biggest reason health initiatives fail, especially for believers, is that we don't bring God into them actively, and we don't put not just our hopes and our dreams through the lens of Christ, we don't put our everyday actions through the lens of Christ. We allow the emotions of the situation about how we feel about certain things to be more important to us than what God feels about certain things. And when you do that, you're not going to have enough willpower, because the one who has the willpower for us, we've blocked out. And then we get angry. We're like, God, you can stop this at any time. Meanwhile, God's just sitting there like, I am totally ready. Please just bring me into this. So do it. So no matter where you're at in this journey, my prayer for you is this. Step one, genuinely look at your life through the lens of Christ, who he is, how he feels about you, and what he's called you to do. That should be the most important thing to you. From that will then direct your steps on how do you use your time, how do you use your resources, what emotions are from God and what emotions aren't. How do you process those emotions? And then from that should allow you to make the steps and the actual external solutions very easy, because it's not me versus exercise. It's me saying, oh snap, it's a beautiful day, and there are tons of people in wheelchairs right now who would die to go for a walk, and I'm going to waste 8 hours and not. It's not really honoring to God. God's not really in that process. There are tons of people who don't have a job who would love to have a job. There are tons of people right now who have no security. All of us seem blessed to some degree. And when we box God out of that, quite often we don't see that. And then we allow negative emotions to overcome us. And the easiest way to stop that is to bring God in the process. Make sure you're wearing your spiffy God vest. Maybe not spiffy, but y'all probably have better vests than I do, but I love vests. That's another sermon for another time. But to genuinely look at your weight loss process first through the lens of God, to address the internal challenges that we have emotionally, to then allow us to externally enact the solutions that we know are going to lead to weight loss. It's not about willpower. It's not about being better than the person next to you. It's not about being stronger, smarter, or more clever. It's about simply acknowledging that we've got so much supernatural power, and a God who was willing to die on a cross for us, who I'm sure if you said, God, just give me the strength for 30 minutes of worth of walking and cardio, he'd show up. All we have to do is take that first step and say, God, please be a part of this process. I'm not strong enough to be alone with pretzel rods. Please give me the strength to be alone with pretzel rods. God, give me the strength to be alone with Cadbury eggs. God, give me the strength and the actual application of wisdom to be alone with these little Reese Pieces that my kids seem to have, and it's all I can do to not look at them. But I won't bring my baggage into this. But God, we thank you so much for this opportunity.